Doing today, tonight, whatever time it is. This is Webcomics A-Z. I am Trae Dorn. It is 10 o'clock at night. And so normally this is a panel. They have me do it like 3 in the afternoon. But they're having me doing it 10 o'clock at night because they decided Trae doesn't need sleep. He's not a person. Normally, I would put up a nice PowerPoint presentation, but because I don't have the stuff to hook up to that projector, I'm not going to. And I'll read it to you because it's really boring, and it's all the text I'm going to say just on a screen. And I think you're all smart, intelligent people. And we're all smart, intelligent people, and we all want to do webcomics. And I am in no way delaying while I get my notes up in front of me. So we can, yes, webcomics, I say, because I said it. I am so tired right now. All right, so I don't care that wingdings aren't on my iPad. Every time I open up this presentation, it says it's not going to appear as you expect. Wingdings aren't on this iPad, and my only thought is, there's no wingdings in this entire presentation. What is happening? Hi, Paul. No, it would involve loading up too much software, and it's not worth it for what is effectively a bunch of text on the screen. I gave up 2 hours ago and was like, I'm not going to bother, or else I would have gotten you, Paul. I love you, Paul. Everybody on the internet who is watching me webcast this live, you can't see Paul, but I was talking to him off camera. For those of you who tuned into Nerd and Ties the off week and expected a 10-minute episode, instead you get an hour-long convention panel of me talking. You just watched the wrong video. All right. So we're going to cover a couple of different things. This panel, we're going to talk about, when we call this Webcomics A-Z, because we're going to talk about the entirety thing of all the creative stuff behind putting together a webcomic, the stupid technical stuff that you have to do to put together a webcomic, and then finally the frustrating, mind-killing promotional stuff you have to do to put together a webcomic. Because unlike, say, like traditional comics publishing, when you are a webcomic artist, you are not just a creative person. You are also a marketer, and I'm still wearing this stupid tie. You are also your marketing, and you are also your technical team, because life is hard and life is pain, and they shouldn't have put this panel at 10 at night. First, to start out with who I am and why I have any reason to say any of this stuff. For those of you who don't know, I'm Trae Dorn. I am most likely taller than you. I might not be. There are taller people in the world than me, but just looking around this room, I think it's a good bet that I'm taller than all of you. I'm the creator of 2 different webcomics, and when I say 2 different webcomics, I mean 4 different webcomics, but I destroyed 2 of them and burned them off the internet, and you will never find them because they are that bad. And I especially like to pretend Roommate 25 never happened. Even if it is canonical to my other work. So there are 5 people in the world who know backstory on characters that you'll never know. And your life is that much more hollow for it. And I'm sorry. No, I'm not. All right, so you should check out my stuff. I do Unconventional, which can be found at unconventional-comic.com. I know it's hard. Which is a convention. It's a comic about people who run a convention. Again, when you put my panel at 10 at night and I've been talking all day, words will start to invert with themselves within sentences, and strange things will happen. The other comic I do is the Chronicles of Crowsarth, which is a steampunk comic, which is found at Crowsarth, which is a made-up word which you don't know how to spell, .com. Crosarth. I didn't bring any. I can be, for those of you at No Brand Con, I can be found in the Artist Alley tomorrow if you want any business cards. For those of you watching the video at home later, all 5 of you who will probably bother loading this, you can't get those business cards at No Brand Con because you're not here. I'm looking at you, tiny blue camera. But I'll put links in the description down below. Yes, my finger's on camera. All right, so that is what I do. And so let's start out with talking about the creative stuff. How many of you are currently working on, like, how many of you are currently trying to do a webcomic? Okay. Well, how many of you aren't just trying and have successfully put one on the internet? Okay, good. You're going to need my help. How many of you are just thinking about it and want to do it? Okay. All right. That is fair, because we're going to start out then with the creative stuff, which is also known as the fun part until it's not, and then you just have to keep doing it because you started a comic and it has an update schedule and you're going to have to do it. Or else nothing, or else you won't have a comic. I don't know. The first thing, obviously, is the dumbest sentence I've ever had. Come up with a concept to write a comic about. You've probably already done that. If you haven't done that and you want to create a comic, that's what you should do. Why am I telling you this? I don't know. You probably already know what to do, whether it's a slice of life comic or a superhero epic or a superhero slice of life steampunk epic. Throw some gears on it. It'll get you some extra clicks off of brass goggles. I mean, I would read that comic if you made that. So send me the link and get started on it immediately. The first thing obviously you know what you want to do, but the first thing you're going to do is when you consider a cast for your comic. Now, I've seen people get overly ambitious, and I've seen people not work hard enough. If you're going to do a comic, you're going to need more than one person. Your awesome OC that you developed is going to need someone to talk to. But you also don't want to make a cast of 20 and then update once a week, because none of your characters will mean anything to any readers. I will say, when you're starting out a comic of any kind, when you're doing this, you want to focus on 2 to 4 characters to start with. 2 to 4 is your range. You can have secondary casts that are larger than that, but don't try to make your readers pay attention to more than 2 to 4 at first, or else they're going to cry. They're going to cry. I'm going to murder Mike Keller. No, I'm not. I'm putting this on the internet. I am not going to murder anybody. FBI, who has flagged this video, I will not commit any crimes ever. I've never committed any crimes. This is called what happens when you decide, hey, we're going to webcast my panel, and then the panel's at 10 at night after I've been here all day, and a guy I've known for 15 years yells at something from the door, something stupid. And then I say something stupid on the internet, and that's all you hear. All right, so your cast also, so when designing a cast, think about the following things. Once, you want them to be visually diverse. This is the only time that I really should have had a projector, because I had examples to show you of diverse main casts, but I didn't. And normally then I would have a book when I don't have a thing to show you, but I didn't bring any of my books with their cast pages. So just imagine 4 people who look very different from each other visually. Just think of it. Think about different faces, different head shapes. You know, you don't want a character with, like, if you're doing more simple shapes, think about varying round faces and oval faces and square jaws and things like that, because you want these characters to be visually distinct. The last thing you want is like 4 characters who all look the same, just with different haircuts, because then 2 years down the road, you're going to draw someone like wearing a hat and not know who they are. All right. Also, names, and this is the first piece of advice I give to anyone writing fiction. In your main characters, do not give two characters names that start with the first letter unless you really want some reader to confuse them for each other at some point down the line. And I say this as a person who has had a reader complain that they confused a character named Max, who is a guy, with the character named Megan, who is a Megan. Okay? I know it sounds like so just avoid giving any two characters the same first syllable name, because especially with webcomics are inherently serially updated, which means you're getting a new page every day, which means most people aren't going to read them all in a row, which means to keep track of who characters are, while there 25% of your audience is going to stay on track every time and never get confused. Another 50% are going to be like, they'll be able to catch up, but they'll have to remind themselves. And then 25% of your audience just is drunk. They just are. They're going to read it at midnight, and they're drunk already. All right, so that's basic stuff. Now, when you're developing a webcomic, you have to, besides thinking about your premise, you have to think about what kind of format that best goes towards, whether or not, for example, like if you're doing a humorous thing, whether you want to go single panel or 3-panel, or, if single panel comic, for those of you, would be something like The Far Side, single panel with a caption, or single panel with where just one image, and that tells the story. 3-panel is a 3 or 4-panel comic is a kind of standard strip. Or if you want to do or if it's something that lends itself both to like a full comic page. Like a serious story will probably work better being told through a flexible comic, like a full-size page that can go forward, where something more comical, humorous, can sometimes work better as a strip if you've got a punchline at the end of every single one of them. That doesn't mean you can't break that formula. My comic Unconventional started out as a simple 3-panel gag strip, and now I kind of take advantage of the fact that I'm on the web and just break everything. You're on the web. Now, you can do whatever you want for your page layout. You don't have to keep a consistent page size. You can do a strip and then do a page and then do whatever. But it does change what you do if you ever want to do a print collection. I do 2 different books. I do 2 different comics. Crowsarth I do in page style. When I put together a Crowsarth book, it is, all right, wrote the introduction, drag page into the final book. And it's just every page is done already because I've written it and designed it as a page. I write Unconventional, and every strip is a different size. And I'm repositioning, I'm scaling. How many can I spell? Oh, crap, I've got to. And then that's where the bonus text is going, because I have half a page to fill. Let's tell them a dumb story. So I will say your format is going to affect what you do, whether or not, if you ever want to go to print. Consistent sizes are going to make eventually, if you ever want to do a print version, you don't have to ever go to print. Like, there's never going to be a print version of Homestuck, because it would be impossible without like some pop-up book sections to replace the Flash, maybe. Oh, I've got to, someone get me on the phone with. Anyways, all right. So again, strips tend to lend better to comedy, but drama fits better into pages. People who can do single panel comics, gag strips, are savants and should be worshipped, because every person in this room probably has 5 single panel gag comics in there that would be great in them. Some of you might have 20. I'm betting there's a good chance that none of you have 100. I tried to do a single panel gag strip for a year, and it was hard. It is technically still on the internet. It's called Irresponsible Irreverence, and it's terrible. It has some of the dumbest jokes I've ever written. I wrote a Morse code joke because I was out of ideas, and I had it was a Wednesday. It was supposed to update. The boat. The dumbest joke. So I will tell you, if you think you're going to do a single panel comic, if you can do it, please let me throw money at you, because you are a unicorn. So, yeah. Now, whether you're doing... Now, here's the problem. Okay, so you're writing a serialized piece of fiction with a webcomic. So at the end of every strip, and this is kind of like the big point of, the end of every strip or page is going to need a hook. If it's a comedy, your hook is your punchline. If it's a drama, this is where things get hard. When a writer for DC Comics or Marvel Comics writes a book, they don't have to necessarily worry about you turning the page as much. Like, they want to keep it compelling, but they don't have to... You're not going to, like, put the book down and come back the next day and then read the next page. So you need to... And it can make for a little awkward reading sometimes in print collection form, but you need to somehow try to hook the reader at the end of every page. And it's tough, and whether it's a character asking a question, just a mild bit of suspense, it is difficult. And, it's a thing. It is a thing you will have to do if you want to write something serious. And there's a reason why, while I believe that The Chronicles of Crowsarth is a very good comic, it has probably half the readers as my comedy. Because it's easier to keep people coming back on a punchline. All right, so the final part of the creative stuff is you got to figure out is, one, get your stuff onto a computer. If you're drawing digitally, that's super easy. If if not, you're going to have to get to a scanner. That archaic device that goes... Just the matter of fact. Do stuff on the computer. Once you scan it or work digitally, you either need Photoshop, or if you're cheap like me, GIMP. GIMP is free. GIMP is wonderful. GIMP is only about half as powerful, but if you just need to make a page and put some word balloons on it, GIMP! Digital lettering is your friend. Your handwriting's not as good as you think it is. If you don't feel like shelling out money for a good comic book font, may I recommend the most overused webcomic font on the internet that doesn't look bad, Digital Strip. Digital Strip is what it's called, and it is free, and it works, and it's not terrible, and it looks good. It looks good. I would say about half the webcomics I've seen on the internet use it. So, if you want to look like the most nondescript comics lettering, Digital Strip is the answer. And finally, the last part of the creative before we move on to the harder stuff that some of you probably came here for is you're going to build a buffer. The first thing you do before you put a single comic on the internet, before you buy that domain name, before you do anything, you want to do 3 months worth of comics. If you're going to update every day, whether you're going to update once a week, you want 3 months worth of comics. And I'm going to tell you why. 1, this is going to mean that when you start, you will automatically have an archive. You might want to still dole these out one at a time, but to hook a new comic reader, you need anywhere from 30 to 100 comics to get someone hooked. Because if I've seen so many webcomics where people have gone out and said, I have the newest, hottest webcomic. It is Bob's Webcomic of Doom, and there are 2 comics up. And they both look there are 2 pages up, and they both look really good. And I'm going to forget about it because you've only given me 2 pages of character stuff. And I know his name is Bob, and he lives in a webcomic made of Doom, and, he's got a cat. The cat hasn't done anything yet because it's only the 2nd comic. So by having multiple, you need an archive first to really hook a new reader. They need to have something to taste, something to get them hooked, make them care about, or just at least to prove that you're consistently funny. All right? Secondly, the reason why this is important, is it will get you used to churning these things out. You have signed up to create a serialized piece of fiction, folks. That means that you need to keep updating once you start. The biggest way to kill any webcomic is to miss an update. especially within the first year. You miss an update, if nothing goes up, you are going to lose audience members. And if you miss 2 updates, there's a percentage of people who are going to assume you're on hiatus or dead. Every update you miss, you hemorrhage readers. And they may not come back when you start updating again. So by doing a 3-month buffer, besides the fact that you'll have a 3-month buffer, don't tell anyone until a month of comics are up, but then you just it's there. So if you suddenly get rear-ended on your way home from the mall and don't have time to draw a comic that day, your comic still updates that day, and you have time to go back and play catch-up on your buffer. And mind you, I tell everyone keep a 3-month buffer. My buffer is non-existent right now. But I also have been doing this long enough where I can churn out a comic in less than 2 hours, so that's the other thing, is you'll get faster. You will get so much faster. Your first comic, when you create that 3-month buffer, I'm betting will take you twice as long as the last comic you draw. You're going to get faster, and you're going to get better the more you draw these characters. And so by building this buffer, you are automatically building an experience before you really launch. But so say you've drawn 3 months worth of comics, and they're sitting on your desk or in your computer, and you need to put this somewhere. Here's the part that no one who makes a webcomic thinks this is going to be my favorite bit of this story, and that's putting it on the frickin' internet. All right, there are 2 choices out there. You can either use a comics hosting or blog site, or you can self-host. There are advantages and disadvantages to both of these. Comic hosting sites like, say, Smack Jeeves, or some of the ones I haven't paid attention to lately. All of these sites, like Drunk Duck, I don't know if they're still around. There's another thing. The pros are they're free. Here's this thing that you can just upload your comic to, and it's not going to cost you any money. There's often an established community of people posting there. Sometimes these sites will let you subscribe to other comics, and they'll let people comment, and that can help build an audience. And also, again, as I said previously, it's free. The cons, you're at someone else's whim. You don't control the look of your site that much. Someone else's advertising is going to run on there. And honestly, being my comic is super awesome or Bob's Webcomic of Doom.smackjeeves.com can look to some people a little amateurish. That's okay, because you're an amateur at this point. But it's just something to remember long term. The traditional, now, when you do it this way, there are 2 ways to do it. Either traditional comics like Smack Jeeves, or I don't know if Comic Fury or Comic Genesis are still around there. I haven't looked in a couple of months, but those are some good examples where they're designed to host comics. And there are sites that are designed to just host comics, and that's it. There are also non-traditional hosting sites. Tumblr is probably the best example these days, and it works really well for single gag stuff. Blogspot's another option. Really, any blog hosting platform. There are some good Tumblr themes that work well with webcomics, with navigation. And that is an option. You're going to do... So you still get the free of the being on one of those comic hosting sites with a little bit more control, but you're going to do more work to make sure it functions. You have to do a little bit more by hand. Again, these are they're free, but you're getting what you're paying for. There's a danger. Drunk Duck was once very popular and then went down for approximately 2 months without warning. Every single comic that was hosted in 2013, it went down for 2 months, and every single comic hosted on that site was completely inaccessible for 2 months. When you pay nothing for content hosting, you are not the customer, you're the product. This is something always to keep in mind. You are the thing that's being sold to viewers to get advertising dollars at that point. And that's fine. But it is a free way to start. If you don't have any money, it's actually a really good option. Because I'm betting maybe not all of you, but most of you are not necessarily like, programmers or technical professionals. I don't know. I don't know your life stories. Maybe you are. I know one of you's a biologist. But once you get popular, so even if you go this route, eventually, if you get huge, if you manage to become like the next big thing, you'll want to go to the other option, which is self-hosting, which is building your own site, and you're going to pay money for that. And you'll probably buy shared hosting on a web hosting service like, say, a Small Orange or, HostGator. Again, you're going to pay money for that. So if you are poor, don't do this. Go with a comic host. Because, again, so if you're poor but willing to put in the work, Tumblr's actually a really good option these days. It didn't used to be. When I first created this panel was, years and years ago, and Tumblr wasn't as, some of the tools for doing webcomics on Tumblr weren't as good. But now that there are some decent themes out there, you'll put in more work. But first off, with Tumblr, you can buy a custom domain URL. So you can look a little bit more professional without spending a lot of money. But it will be more work, and you'll have to put in a little more effort. But I would say that the fact that you can then, your comics can be reblogged from the original source is a benefit if you start building a community there. Like, if you need a free option, honest to God, these days, I didn't used to recommend using a blog hosting site at all. I used to always recommend a comics hosting site. But because Tumblr's unique image sharing community and the fact that, honest to God, if you write something really good, someone's going to steal it and then put it on Tumblr themselves, you may as well be there are ways to use it. It's a little bit more difficult. Now, with self-hosting where you pay money, that's what I do for my comics. Like, I pay for hosting, but I also minored in computer science and web development and design. I used to do for a living, so I had a little bit of an advantage on this one where I had a whole bunch of server space. But you get what you pay for with it. Like, if a host is $5 a year, it's probably going to be awful when you do it this way. I like a Small Orange because it's got really good service, but I pay a bit more I pay about $20 a month right now, which is, not an arm and a leg. But if you are broke, that sometimes is, food. So now with all this stuff, be it with this, you have to separate domain name from web space, like from where your comic's actually hosted. These are separate things. I didn't used to explain this, and then people got confused. So you may or may not know this. Some of you will, some of you won't. When you buy a domain name, you're just renting the name. So when I buy, if you buy bobsdiscountcomic.com, I don't know why Bob's Comic is discount now, but if you buy that URL, you're just buying the name. It's just sitting out there. What you need to do then is point it towards a server somewhere, and then you rent. Most people, in theory, you could go buy a full server and a T1 line and a bunch of expensive things and plug it in your house, or you can go rent some space on a data farm. And you just need to point your domain name that you've bought of Bob's Discount Comic, because I'm sticking with that now, and point it towards that server space that you're paying for. So it's, it's... also, never buy hosting from a domain registrar. It's a ripoff. So if GoDaddy tries to sell you hosting, you're overpaying. That's just a tip. All right. So you've got a place to put a site. If you're doing self-hosting, now you need an actual way to do it. You could do it manually with HTML pages, but that is stupid because it is a lot of work for zero reward. What you want to do is install WordPress. Install WordPress. Most web hosts will let you do it with 2 clicks. And then there are half a dozen web hosting themes, like comic themes that are designed for it. Like I use Comic Press, which is a little out of date. There's a theme called Webcomic, and it just turns, if you ever go and you read Dumbing of Age by David Willis, you're seeing a Comic Press installation on a WordPress site. where it's a WordPress blog turned into a comic hosting site with a theme. And you can literally do it without knowing how to program anything. You don't need to know how to program anything. You just got, if you can operate a web page and click some buttons, you can do this. But again, that's if you're willing to pay money. I would say most people, if you want to spend $0 and do this, use either a comics hosting site, which is the easiest way, or do it on Tumblr. But if you feel comfortable, or if you have a friend who knows how to do this, you can con into it, and you feel like spending the money, you can go do what I do and pay for it. But again, you're paying for it. That is pretty much the boring technical stuff. And I can answer more questions on that. I should have time for questions after we run through the overview. And yeah, like I said, this is a panel that's usually like an educational panel at like 2 p.m. And everyone seems to still be here, which I'm happy with. But everyone seems to be quietly listening intently, which is freaking me out. Good, you're all alive and not hallucinations. All right, so you've written all these comics, you've drawn all these comics, you've put them on the internet, and no one is reading it because you haven't told anyone it exists yet. You need to do that now as we move into the final thing, as you are now a marketer. You must now promote your work without pissing off every single person you've ever met. Because just because you built it does not mean they will come. There are 2 types of promotion, and this is going to be the most obvious dichotomy I have ever stated: unpaid and paid. Just like there are 2 kinds of people, the ones to the left of me and the ones to the right. Tautologies are fun. Again, wait until at least like 30 or up before you start serious promotion, because again, Bob's Comics got 2, Bob's Webcomic of Doom only has 2 up, but Bob's Discount Webcomic put up 30. I'm going to remember to read Bob's Discount Webcomic because I actually care about Steve Bob and his dog. Because the dog's had some serious character development. He's gone through some shit. And I care about that. For unpaid promotion, take advantage of whoring yourself on every social network you're on. Twitter is your friend. Tumblr is your friend. Facebook is your friend. I don't know how to promote a comic on Snapchat, but the instant someone figures it out, tell me. Again, sign up for Twitter. Every time your comic updates, you should be posting it to Twitter saying, "New page! Look at that! Steve Bob's dog got a driver's license." Tumblr, I used to say take advantage of the tags, but search has gotten so complicated, and I can tell that I wrote this in 2013 when I read that sentence. Facebook is great. I will say, even though I'm going to talk about paid stuff in a minute of showing out for advertising, never buy a Facebook ad. Facebook ads about the biggest waste of money in your life. Organic Facebook likes are, in my experience, twice as likely to see your thing happen again than someone who liked your page for your comic off of a Facebook ad. I do not know why this is true, but I know that I have 2 pages that have similar numbers of likes. One of these got some of these likes at running a Facebook ad, and every single one of them, because when you run a Facebook page, you can see, you don't know who saw it, but you can see the number of people who saw it. And the one where I didn't pay for an ad and just naturally got to that many likes from people running across on the comic, it's always twice as many people saw that update than the one where I did advertising on Facebook. So don't buy Facebook ads. Facebook is important to promote on. Also, every time you update, you should post it to your own personal Facebook so your parents go read it. And I will tell you, once you have print collections and you want to save money on Christmas gifts, just give your parents your books. They'll think it's great. Or at least they'll tell you it is. And really, at Christmas, isn't that all that matters? Other things, unpaid promotions. Get yourself on whatever comic list websites are out there. These really only get you minor results for some of them, but they're worth it because they're free. Like the webcomics list, which nobody searches anymore, but that one guy who wants to really find your webcomic is going to search for it there. Like the one guy who wants the comic about Bob's steampunk flying cat, which is really the interesting thing about Bob's webcomic of Doom I didn't expect, or I wouldn't have if I had kept reading it. Like that, some guy might be looking for that comic, so get it on the webcomics list because you might get one good reader off of it, and for no money, one good reader is worth no money. Ink Outbreak, though, is pretty good. Like there are a couple of comic services that let people subscribe to your comics, and they'll still display your whole page just with a little bar on top, but so any advertising you have will still show up. And like Ink Outbreak, Comic Rocket, these both are out there. Get yourself listed in them. Like even if you get like 10, like again, every single reader you get for no money is a reader you got for no money. So, oddly enough, also the one that has out of free stuff, it's not going to get you a huge number of people. Get yourself listed in the Belfry Comics list. You have never heard of this, but the people who check that and look for new comics, like you'll get like a whole bunch of people in like the first couple of days, because every time they add a new comic, they feature it on their front page for like a week, like in a list. But the people who go to that site are people who really want to read webcomics. And they go, oh, look, here are 10 new webcomics. I'll see if I like any of them. So, again, these are free. And again, free costs no money, which is cheaper than food. All right. Other ways to do unpaid promotion. Offer to do guest strips for other comics. Not every comic is looking for them. Not every comic wants them. But it actually never hurts to ask, because the worst thing you're going to get is a no, like, no, I don't need them. But you might find, like, that one webcomic that has a bigger readership than you do does take guest strips. And you do a good one. And some of those readers will check out your comic. And maybe they'll be your readers. Again, the worst thing that's going to happen is that whoever you ask if they are accepting guest strips will say no. It's okay if they say no. Rejection is your friend. Rejection lets you know you aren't dead yet. Being not dead is more fun than the alternative. All right. So this is how I dated this. Okay, promote yourself on forums. If you can find a forum that still exists, post to that you already post. So don't go join forums to promote your comic. There are some, like, say you're doing a steampunk comic, you're probably going to want to post something about it on Brass Goggles. What is Brass Goggles? Well, if you want to find a steampunk forum, that's one of the last ones left. There are more, but like, only do it places you are willing to actually be active. And don't overdo it. There is a particular webcomic which doesn't exist anymore, but was notorious on every single site they ever posted on, repeatedly posting to the thread of promoting their comic every update. And you'd get these 300-page long threads of just this one guy posting, and everyone was like, God, I wish this guy would go away. And never said it, and we never read his comic because, oh my God, it was the most obnoxious thing in the world. The Continentals. I mean, so don't overdo it. But two, always have a link. Like if you say you post on Bob's Secret Forums of Death, because this is 2016 and those are the only kind left. Signature, put a link to your comic in your signature, because even then you're not being a dick. You're not saying, look at my comic, look at my comic, look at my comic. No, you're saying, I disagree. I think Bob shouldn't have gotten that haircut. Steve Dave. Read Steve Dave's comic. See? Not obnoxious. Man, that advice worked a lot better 15 years ago. But it's still there. Like, if you happen to be there. And now, here's the nitty-gritty. The dark secret. Paid promotion and advertising. This is a pain in the ass, and this costs money. And I will tell you, do unpaid first. Try to build an audience organically if you can. Try to get your friends to tell their friends who tell two of their friends, and so on, and so on. And oh my God, none of you were born when that commercial existed. I'm old. All right. Now, Facebook, if you're going to buy ads, don't buy ads on Facebook. Facebook ads are not worth the money, period. I'm calling you out, Mark Zuckerberg, because I know you're watching this, because you watch everything I do, because you're a creepy man. Yeah. Now, on the other hand, there are some great ways to promote that don't cost a huge amount of money. There's Project Wonderful is a good example of an ad network, usually that a lot of comics will run. And by the way, advertising on webcomics to webcomic readers is a direct way to get a hold of webcomics, like readers. Words, they mean things when I say them. But don't spend a lot of money on these ads. What I like to do are what I call long-term penny campaigns. You can create a campaign that automatically bids on certain topics. Okay. Please be choosy where you go. And yeah, I was just going to wait. I'm not playing with drunk people. Saturday night, we're boring. Go away. Long-term penny campaigns, which is where you only bid like 1 or 2 cents, and you have it bid on words with keywords related to your comic, and you can set it to only bid during hours of the day, and that like you think people will be awake, and automatically, and like maybe you only spend $1 over the course of an entire month. And maybe you only get a handful of readers, but you got $1 worth of readers versus spending like $8 and getting 2 guys because you've bought an ad for a day on a more trafficked website, or $50 for an ad for a day on a super trafficked website like questionable content. That stuff's expensive. And so it's worth going as cheap as possible. Other ways of paid promotion are conventions. Where we are. Artist alley tables are your friends. But cons make it complicated to get to artist alley tables. There's a particular convention I'm not going to name because they've changed this because this convention's gotten better. But a few years ago, they had this wonderful thing on their webpage saying, Artist Alley opening soon, Artist Alley opening soon, Artist Alley opening soon, Artist Alley opening soon. I checked it every single day. It was a juried selection process, by the way. This was not a first come, first soon. Every single day, Artist Alley opening soon, Artist Alley closed. Because apparently they decided to only tell people through a secret mailing list that they didn't actually list on their website, but listed once on a social media campaign, how to get to the Artist Alley registration. This convention has fixed this, and now you can actually get to their application when they run new cons. But this was what they were like for like 2 or 3 years. And, yeah, it's terrible. And so, but to go back to cons, if you can get into cons, most of them you're going to have to apply. It's a juried process. You might not get in. And even if you get into a con one year, you might not get in the next year. It's a pain, but nothing is going to beat a face-to-face interaction. And here's the pain in the ass. You're going to actually have to be a person who talks to people. I know. It's terrible. You walk into an artist alley and you see a room full of people who don't want to talk to people. This is my impression of 90% of people in artist alley. That is, these are people who wanted to be creative, not people who wanted to be salesmen. All right? Unfortunately, because you are a one-person marketing team with no support, you have to be your salesman. So you're going to have to learn to pretend to like talking to people. Whether you want to or not. You're going to have to do the most obnoxious thing in the world, and that is smile when you don't want to. Because you're in customer service, boys and girls. Customer service. But here's the thing, nothing beats face-to-face interactions. Everybody, like, it's the face-to-face interactions that you have with a potential reader, they're going to remember you. And when they connect a comic to you, the author, they feel more connected to that comic as well. Like, it feels more like it's theirs because they know who you are as the author, and so they feel more personally connected to you, and so they're going to more personally connect to your work. It's a psychological thing. It is why you also always put the business card in their hand, because they will take it whether they want it or not. And since it costs them no money, there's no guilt. I mean, it costs you money. You paid for a business card. You might be shy, and that's unfortunate. You're going to have to learn how to pretend to be brave. And it's going to be okay. Trust me, I'm a naturally introverted person. But you would never know it talking to me at a table. I have a spiel. I'm very comfortable with my spiel because I have said it more times than I can possibly account. You see, I do 2 webcomics, The Chronicles of Crowsarth, the steampunk adventure, and Unconventional. It's a comic about people who run a convention. Now, both of these are webcomics, so they're available to read for free online, and reading them online will make you taller, faster, stronger, more attractive to the gender of your choice, and feed your very soul. I also sell print collections, which help feed me more literally in that I can afford food later. But if you're not reading it online for free, at least we are both losing, and we cannot let that happen. If you have stopped by my table in the last 5 years, you have probably heard a variation of that. Because it just comes out now. I'm not doing it consciously. If you practice it, you can pretend to be capable of talking to people. So, that is the most basic overview of this, and I have a few minutes for questions if anybody has them. You don't have a question, Sam. You just got here.
My question was, what was this thing that I missed?
This is the Webcomics A-Z panel. If you'd been here 2 hours ago, you would have been on time for Nerd and Tie Live, which you would have liked. Yes. Okay, so for the viewers at home, when you're laying out a comic, is there you're asking how I do layouts? Okay, so the way I started, nowadays, because I've done it so much, I lay it out in my head ahead of time. But when I started doing this, I would write scripts, and what I would do is thumbnail every comic. What I would do is, because I was doing a 3-panel comic, but I did this with my other thing when I was doing pages, is I would sketch out the boxes of the comic, just squares, and then I would stick figure in my characters, not bothering to give details, just little like initials under them so I knew who it was, and then I would write out the dialogue as I did it, and then if it didn't feel right, I would change it, I would rearrange it, like, oh, this doesn't really work as 3 panels, like, do I need to split it into 2 comics, can I add a punchline here? So yeah, I just would quick draw, like, stick figure it out, or thumbnail it, like, would technically be the term. And it's really easy if you're doing a 3-panel comic because you're aiming for 3 panels, or it's like the size of what you're doing, and it is helpful to like pick a standard size when you're starting. Like if you're gonna I like the fact that with webcomics you can do any shape or size because you're on the internet, but it is helpful structurally to like pick a format and then you write to the format. Yeah, is that helpful? Okay, I got a thumbs up, so yes. Any other questions, comments, concerns, rocks to throw at me? Sam, I will lick your ear and you won't like it. That's how hard I'm going to lick it. I know. This is going on YouTube, Sam. Yes. I could not hear you because of the amount of noise from the hallway. You can always just come closer and ask. And then I could hear the words.
Characters with the same letter for the first name. What if it's the same letter, but then they look completely different?
Well, okay, so you would think that would work. You would think that. So it's for if it didn't come across on the audio here, it's if characters have the same letter of the first name and they look completely different. I again had a character like a male character and a female character look completely different, who both had and again I had readers confusing a Max and a Megan. So most of your audience will get it. Most of them will, but you are going to have to prepare yourself for every once in a while pointing out to someone who might be drunk that they are different people. So, I mean, it's a risk. It's if there's contextual reasons for why they would have it, be they common names within the culture, or if there's some other, frankly, if you're just really attached to those names, yeah, you can try it, but it will mean that, maybe someone's going to get confused down the road. So it's a general guideline. It's if you don't do it, it's not the end of the world. There are good comics that do this. It's just that you got to watch out. Yeah. Yeah.